Hey folks, it's Jeremy Kirkland. You're listening to Blammo. How are we doing? It's a new day. Look at that. The sun rises again. I'm hoping you're all getting through it. It is wacky out there. I'm still surrounded by snow. I'm getting a short temper. I'm losing my temper, man. I love the winter. I love putting coats on. I love the layers. I love getting my fits off and some big fits and some nice heavy layers. But when the snow is this much all over the place and it's coming down by the foot, I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling it. I'm angry. But, you know, what is it? What is it? Get mad at the weather? Got plenty of other things to get mad at. Also, snow shoveling is a drag, especially when you're almost 40. I realized I was never snow shoveling correctly. You know, I'm supposed to be lifting with my legs. I was lifting with my back. I mean, well, what am I doing? It's amateur hour out here. And then the salt, it got into my bean boots. It's just whatever. But there is a lot of good, and an overwhelming amount of it is from my guest this week. Now, before I dive in, for real now, I feel like I need to set the stage a bit. Because I've been a fan of the brand William Frederick for a while. But, you know, the lookbooks are amazing, the styling is on point, and it's got this kind of feel to it that it just makes you, you feel good without saying too much, you know? And I feel like that's kind of how I've wanted my style to be lately. I don't want to be too loud, but I want to be comfortable, and I want it to, you know, I want a little bit of mystique. I want it to be intriguing, exciting. It's kind of perfect, but I was completely unprepared for the intensity of the conversation with this pod. Now, I say this because I loved it, but I mean, we just went straight into it. And I have to say, William's transparency on everything was just incredibly refreshing and pretty jarring. Like, there's no arrogance from him, but like, there's this confidence that I quickly became really like envious of, right? And as you'll hear, he's just like everyone else. I mean, he's as normal as everyone else is out there. But because he's so open about how normal he is, I think he really demystifies this capital D in designer. And it's great. It's super refreshing. I mean, he shares his factories with people. He shares nearly everything because he's this kind of rising tide lifts all ships, which is really refreshing in just this jaded, wild industry. Because it doesn't make sense. But you know what? I think that's kind of how he wants it to be. You know, so it's a great pod. I'm excited for you to listen to it. We discuss his life growing up in Ohio, how one coat started the brand, fit pics at Fashion Week, his commitment to manufacturing in Ohio, which is pretty wild, supplier transparency, and last but not least, how his love of film shapes the brand. All right, folks, let's dive in. Here we go. Mr. William McNicol, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. How many people call you William Frederick?
All the time.
Yeah.
Anyone who's meeting me for the first time just assumes that's my name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which isn't a bad thing.
I mean, because that was your grandfather. Yeah.
That's his first and middle name.
And you are 100% Ohio and Cleveland, ride or die.
Never left Ohio. I was actually raised closer to Pittsburgh, though.
Okay.
I grew up right on the border of Ohio, West Virginia, and PA. So tri-state area.
Yeah.
Right on the river. Yeah, that was my upbringing. Very small town, about 3,000 people. And then I moved to Cleveland when I did college.
Okay.
So I moved from my hometown to near Cleveland starting in college. I went to Baldwin Wallace. And then from there, I got a job offer in Cleveland. So I've been in Cleveland since 2009 now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a time to move to Cleveland.
Not a great time.
Yeah, but I mean, it's good
at the same time. Good though.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, did you do the whole kind of artist loft sort of scenario? Whatever.
I missed out.
Okay,
I missed that window because they were dirt cheap at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, the live workspace in Cleveland from, I don't know, mid to late 2000s, early 2010s, there were some real gems out there.
And what were you doing working there? Like, I mean, so you moved there and you studied?
Management, finance, minor in film.
Okay.
Had to do something creative.
Oh, hell, that's quite the dichotomy.
Yeah,
okay.
I needed film to get me through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then where do like clothes and stuff enter the picture? I mean, not to fast forward too far ahead, but like what?
Yeah. So I was 28 when I decided, let's try this. I had no idea what I was doing. I have no training. I don't even know at this point what a tech pack is, what a pattern is.
Okay. Sounds like you do now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just walked in, word of mouth, asked around town, where can I go to even begin this process of taking these sketches I have?
Okay, so there were sketches first.
Since I was 5 or 6.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So there was an interest in clothes.
All I cared about, yeah.
Okay. What were you wearing?
I mean, at that time...
Were you a skater
no,
boy?
No. Growing up, definitely, I mean, I had skater influence in some of the fits and the shapes and silhouettes, but it was almost exclusively basketball at that time.
Yeah. Were you a Bulls guy?
No. So growing up,
I'm just assuming everyone liked the Bulls at the 90s, but
yeah, I mean, I had every Jordan, every penny. Definitely cared a lot about sneaker culture at that time. I was always a Kobe guy from 96 draft on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So 96, I'm only still 9 years old. So,
okay. Yeah.
So as soon as he entered the league, favorite player. Yeah. Biggest inspiration in life was him. Yeah.
Really?
Always. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but I'm imagining you're not a Cavs fan.
No.
They're pretty hot right now.
Casually.
Yeah.
Casually. Now that he's not in the league, I would pull for them, but it's not a passion, or it's very much just a casual sports interest with the local team and everything.
Yeah. So you're dressing NBA style, which is what?
East Bay catalog.
East Bay.
Studying East Bay catalog. The physical one coming in the mail every day.
Yeah.
Lots of that. But my grandfather at the time used to take me shopping with him.
Okay.
So this is heyday.
This is Mr. Frederick.
Yes, it is. And this is heyday of department stores.
Okay.
So that's where a lot of the suiting and interest in that comes along.
Yeah.
So he used to take me shopping back at Kaufman's at the time, which in that region was before Macy's bought them.
Mm-hmm.
So we used to go shopping at Kaufman's in Pittsburgh and Steubenville, Ohio. Mm-hmm. So we would go there. He would help me, he would let me help him pick out the dress shirts that he wanted, the slacks he wanted. So it was almost, at the time, I had no idea what I was doing, but it was almost my first kind of foray into styling, into uniform building, because he dressed very conservative. It was like gray, blues, creams, blacks, browns, which is pretty much what my line is. So, there's a lot. And some of that isn't really that intentional. It's just what I'm drawn to, earth tones and subtleties now. But yeah, that would have been. And then randomly one time I was a huge wrestling fan as well. So this is WWF before WWE. And I remember Vince McMahon always used to brag about Armani suits.
He did.
So I did a deep dive as a kid, and that's where I got into suiting. So when the holidays came around, I would always ask for a blue suit. And it was just this thing. I fell in love with Armani.
And a metal chair to slam over my friends' heads.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, for Halloween every year as a different wrestler. It was like, that was really all I cared about. I was also into films really early, but I would say the suiting interest came randomly from all people, Vince McMahon.
That is, I don't think I've ever heard anyone who said, that's great though.
It's a complete mix of worlds for like a 7, 8, 9-year-old to be like dabbling in East Bay, caring about Armani, going to a department store. It was just an amalgamation of different interests and silhouettes and worlds, really.
So you're getting into that. And then you start sketching these things. Mm-hmm. You're basically most of your adolescence.
Yeah.
You go to school, don't think about clothes at all? Were you getting fits off in school?
Every day.
Okay.
It was actually, it wasn't healthy by any means, but you would get bullied if your fit was not up to par.
Yeah.
Looking back now, it's kind of like, oh man, that was a rough era.
Right?
Yeah.
There were a lot of homophobic terms that I was called because I like to wear sport coats.
Oh yeah.
And hoodies. Yeah. And now, which I'm like, this was a pretty fire fit. I was wearing diesel jeans, folks. Yeah. And it's like, no, man, you didn't have the prescription of the jock look at the time.
Yeah. It was actually a pretty brutal era, like mid 90s to late 90s, because our grade school and junior high were also attached to the high school.
Oh, so you were like in the same.
It was 2 buildings, but they were attached.
Okay.
So when you go out for recess or anything, and you're also wanting to impress the same guys on on all the varsity teams and everything. You want them to think you're the cool kid.
Yeah.
So there's also like somewhat of like, I guess looking back, a cute influence in it all, where it's not all just bullying and feeling like you need to keep up from a consumer standpoint, but also taking inspiration from the guys 6, 7, 8 years older than you.
Yeah.
And it's like, it became, just watching them gave me a lot of style influence.
It's true. Because it's funny. I don't think that era, it was not a bad era in terms of like clothes or style, which obviously, because a lot of people are drawing from it now. But yeah, the type of culture, I don't think is anything that is as aspirational as the clothes from that time.
No.
A lot of hazing that was just totally okay.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there was this thing that I don't know why it started or when it started, but we used to fear getting out of our cars when our parents picked us up because there was this thing at my school where if you got out with new Jordans or new, like clearly the first day you're wearing it, everyone would just come up and start scuffing with their own feet. It's that type of shit. Like as a kid, you think this is normal. Looking back, I'm like, this was not the answer to anything.
Yeah, right.
It was crazy.
God, yeah, I remember that. I bought a pair of pumps.
Oh yeah.
And really thought I was cool with pumps. And I remember
you're talking about like the D Brown.
Yeah, like the Reebok
pumps after he did the blindfold dunk.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
The same reason. Same reason I got them. Yeah.
And I remember getting those, and there was a kid in my school. Like this is crazy. Like even like remembering this, I'm like remembering exactly everything that happened. But he had a safety pin, and he was like, he's like, I'm gonna pop him. I'm gonna pop your shoes. And now you're like, what the fuck?
Why?
Like, why would what is going on, dude?
It's
like,
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, okay. So we survived that. You survived that. You flourished. You're here.
Yep.
And then you go through college. No desire to do the clothing line at the time?
Yeah, I actually wanted to go to Kent State.
Okay.
Which is really one of the top fashion schools in the country.
Yeah.
About 50 minutes from where I grew up. Also 50 minutes from Cleveland, kind of dead center. And at the time, my parents owned a restaurant supply business.
Cool.
And very cool. Really where I get my entrepreneurial spirit.
Okay.
At that time, I was working in their warehouse since I was 12 or 13, unloading trucks, doing deliveries, installing kitchens in different restaurants, which also led to a restaurant and food love down the road too. But at the time, that's like 2008 recession is approaching. Their business was slowly doing worse and worse.
Right.
So I think out of their fear, based on their own financial situation at the time, they had some real hesitancies about me pursuing something that they saw in the arts and not something that was directly applicable to life right away.
Yeah.
So even though I, threw around the idea, I also had wanted to go to the University of Michigan. That was always my dream, to study business there.
Giant school.
Yes.
Yeah.
But out of state tuition, couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Didn't want to take on that type of debt. And visiting college is also being recruited for basketball at the time. So there's a lot of, I think I'm going to play basketball. And honestly, what I'm studying is kind of not at the forefront of those decisions. Did not love anywhere I visited for basketball and decided to give it up, which absolutely crushed my parents, my family, everyone. That's what everyone was thinking my life would be at the time. And I just visited campuses and I fell in love with Baldwin Wallace.
There you go.
It's a pretty medium-sized liberal arts school. Just felt at home, felt very comfortable. Huge Browns fan, which definitely has some influence because their campus touches the Browns headquarters. In my head, I'm like, I'm going to go work for the Browns one day.
Yeah.
And it just became this thing where I fell out of love with basketball for a little bit. And that definitely influenced where I went to college. And then there definitely wasn't anything artistic where I grew up. So no one even thought it was a realistic thing to go study fashion design. They would almost look down upon that so I definitely wasn't encouraged to study design or fashion or anything along those lines.
Right. In terms of, if you look back at this now, and I'm sure your parents, are they around?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if you look back at this now, I wonder how they feel or you feel in terms of like the encouragement, discouragement of things. And I am curious how like you, because this is completely unrelated to fashion, but I'm curious like how you thought some of this stuff shape you, because I think so much of our influence and so much of our life, is accidentally and unintentionally connected to how we're brought up.
Yeah.
And there's like a level of like appeasement you want to have to your folks.
Yeah.
So like, how do you navigate this thing where it's like, that's your dream. I'm not into this. It doesn't mean I'm a different person now.
Yeah.
But like, just because I'm not going to be shooting from half court doesn't mean I'm, so like, how did you process or handle this?
Yeah, I think it took me a long time to really put words to it. But I think as I got older, let's say 3 years ago now, starting therapy.
Okay, yeah.
Honestly. And
welcome
just like,
to the club.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show.
And just working through it. And I definitely don't have any resentment towards, anyone in my family or anyone in my hometown or anything like that.
Great. That's good.
I just don't think they knew. And so there's that acceptance. But I think also not repeating their ways and understanding and having empathy for their perception of what was realistic for me and understand that they were actually making fear-based decisions.
Yeah.
So now for me, it's two things: radical acceptance. And then the other thing would be not making fear-based decisions.
Yeah.
And talking that through regularly I don't really fear anything with the brand. I mean, I've seen the worst of the worst and I just keep going. And, there's definitely, I think when you care about something and it's a creation or an art, you probably still consider quitting it once or twice every week, no matter how successful you are. You just get in your own head. And there were points where 4 or 5 days a week, I was like, I just have to give this up at this point. It's not panning out. It's not panning out.
Right.
And now that I have that mindset of nothing I decide will be based on fear, it's been full steam ahead since then. And it's almost feels magical that something that simple of a mindset change and developing empathy instead of holding resentment, and how far that can take you, not just obviously in creating, but in life. So,
yeah, that's honestly really beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. Because I think for me, always the first reaction is like anger, resentment. But then also in some cases, I look at some of these things now where it's like I came from a background where I had a ton of emotional support from my parents, no financial support. Or the inability to provide financial support. And, but it was like, what do you want to do? Okay. Well, if you want to do it. Oh, you know what? Okay. Well, if you want to do this, okay. Basically just like, where do you want your compass to go? Where do you want it to point? We'll push you that way. And sometimes I'm almost like, I kind of wish I might have been challenged or pushed to do something else. But at the same time, it goes to show you none of these things are air quoting like right or like that was the correct decision. It's just like, being in, you want ultimately, especially now as a parent, like you want your kid to figure out their own life and be happy and content in that. And sometimes as a parent, you have a vision of what that's supposed to play out.
Completely.
Anyway, I digress, but thanks for going down that rabbit hole with me.
No, it is fun. And to their credit, they have come a long way since I started the brand.
Oh, I'm assuming.
Yeah. It's just they're people who, it's just a small town mentality, but they don't believe it until they see it.
Yeah. And they love you.
Absolutely.
Which is like, so you want to protect someone.
Yeah. And I was sitting in the airport getting ready to fly out to Paris for Market Week this time. And they're both on the phone. They're like, can we call you real quick before you take off? And they're like it felt like they were both in tears. They'll never admit it, but they were like, some of it was disbelief, I'm sure. But the fact that I had made it this far from where I once was with the brand to getting to this point, and you could see and hear, we couldn't see it because I was on the phone, but you could hear the pride and the emotion that they felt. So it's, maybe that, it's these weird things. It's like proving that to them, not necessarily in like, I'm going to prove you wrong way, but proving that it's a realistic thing. Yeah. And maybe a deeper bond comes from that. Yeah. It's like, there's a lot of, it's not, and that's why it's like, it's just not clothing to me. It's something much deeper. And I'm always open to who comes and enters my life and the connections that I make through this world and this industry. So I try to stay as open-minded as possible about this entire world of what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. And so the clothes stuff, you choose this post-college, you start, to jump back, you start asking around from other folks how to do this. How did this kind of start to play out in the earlier stages?
Yeah, so to put a timestamp on it, this is December 2016. So that's the very first time I walk into a factory. I have no idea what I'm doing. So I just walk in. I've got sketches. I've got multiple books. Of, like, references of silhouette. I had no idea, truly. So I walked in and I'm just like, look, I want to make a coat. I want to make a t-shirt. I want to make a button up. I want to make a sweatshirt.
Hell yeah.
How can I start? And they looked at me and that you could tell they didn't take me seriously right away. And I'm like, I wouldn't have either. I was just this dude with some colored pencil sketches and a book of like menswear history and stuff like that. So I leave. They're like, okay, we'll work with you, but there's no plan. And they said they had a fabric source to get wool mountains for me.
Hey, okay.
So I'm like
big dog stuff.
Paying them for fabric sourcing for this top coat. They would handle lining, everything. almost a month goes by. I haven't heard anything. I'm calling them, and I finally get through it. I'm like, look, I'm really serious about this. Can we please order the wool Melton? I'll give you my card number.
Oh.
And once they got the card number, it wasn't long before
money. That's what it took. My bad.
Yeah, it wasn't long before the wool
That
Melton.
whole passion thing doesn't always pay the bills. I get it.
Yeah. So probably should have led with that when I entered the building.
Yeah.
And from there, I mean, it was a crazy coat at the time. I had no clue, but it was cadet blue wool Melton with sky blue wool Melton trim and like a chevron and lines.
Okay.
And it gets done end of January. It's pretty quick.
Yeah.
Turnaround, initial sample. And I just got this idea. New York Fashion Week is coming up.
Oh boy.
I'm just going to go.
He's swinging for the fences.
Yeah. So I have no advice. I'm absolutely don't know a single person in the industry at this point.
Okay.
I just come.
With your coat.
With my coat.
Okay.
And I was like, I want to wear this every day. And
what, were you just going to walk around?
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is right. It's like a lot of my inspiration at this time. This is February 2017. Street style was huge.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's almost as important as the shows, especially New York Fashion Week.
Absolutely.
So I'm on Vogue, all of these sites every day, just studying street style while I'm working my 9 to 5 or at home. I was just so curious.
What was your 9 to 5, if you don't mind?
I still have it.
Okay.
Yeah, I still work corporate 9 to 5 every day. I'm a medical underwriter.
I don't know what that means.
Risk assessment for life insurance, really morbid stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, gauging the likelihood that, when people will die, why they'll die.
Okay. So you're doing this while you're doing your 9 to 5.
Yes.
And you show up with your coat, William the Amazing Technicolor coat, cruising around Fashion Week. And do you get flicked up?
Absolutely.
Oh, hell yeah. Do you know who shot you or what was happening? Or
I can't say the photographer's name off the top of my head, but I ended up in the best 50 outfits of WWD. I remember that. And for me, it's like lifetime achievement.
You fucking did it. Okay.
Yeah. So I went to every single show and just like hung around outside. And I was just curious. I wanted on the spot feedback. Would anyone even notice this? Would anyone acknowledge me? And I did. I got a few compliments here and there. I got into a random Nautica show where it was a creation with Little Yachty. I remember that verbatim. That was the very first time I stepped in a room. Remember Nick Wooster stepping in a room at the time. At the time, this is an incredible thing for me to even be in the room with the same people that I've seen from street style. It's silly now, but at the time, it's a big deal.
Oh, yeah. No, it's great.
Yeah. And I went in every single store in Manhattan that I could find that sold menswear. And I walked in and I just shopped and see would anyone notice. And that was I don't know why this was what I did, but it was just like New York was what meant the most to me. And I was like, if I can get this acceptance with this first thing I made in New York. Yeah. And I remember like calling people. I was like, man, I'm getting a lot of questions about this coat. And it was literally the very first sample. So it was really a mess technically.
Okay, sure. Fine.
I didn't know that.
That's
at the
what
time.
samples are.
It felt great at the time. I was like, I'm ready to go to market with this.
Okay.
And come back on a high. And I was like, okay, it's a real brand now. I'm going to start making tags. I'm going to go for it. So yeah, Evan took me until August 2018 to launch my first collection.
And so because, early on in the conversation, you were talking about you had no idea what tech packs are. You had no idea what all these things are, but you felt good enough to launch your brand without any knowledge of this, it sounds like. Mm-hmm. What made you feel like you could really do it? I say this because I feel like a lot of people that have to do this, you really do have to take some sort of leap of faith. Sounds a little trite, but kind of true.
Oh, yeah.
You just have to do it.
Yeah.
So you did. Why did you feel you could?
I wasn't sure if I could, Well, I felt
but you did it.
I felt there were days where I felt certain and days I felt like I was crazy. I just loved, once I started it, I didn't realize how much I loved everything about it.
Ooh, okay.
And
so it felt good.
Switch happened. This is my purpose.
Oh,
I knew, because I knew at that point, the way I once thought about basketball, the way I once thought about other things in my life, every day when I woke up, I couldn't wait to go do this.
Yeah.
No matter what it was. It could be a sketch. It could be finding a fabric. It could be placing a fabric order. It could be walking into the factory to see a new sample. It could be picking a thread color for a t-shirt.
Yeah.
It could be going into dead stock stores here in New York City. Every single bit of it felt energizing. no matter how much I did it, there's a lot of things in life where the more you do it, you get exhausted when it feels like work. And it never felt like work for me. And that's when I knew no matter what it took, no matter what it looked like, I will always do this. And I knew that right away.
Hell yeah. Wow.
Wait a second. I got to get my bids in on the Bezel app, but more on that in a minute. I get all sorts of emails and questions from you all, which I love to read and respond. And one thing I constantly get, and even read in the Blamo Slack, is what watch should I buy and where should I get it? It's a wild world out there with all sorts of websites and shops, but I go to Bezel. Bezel is the trusted marketplace for buying and selling your next luxury watch with expert in-house authentication on every purchase. First off, folks, it's getbezel.com. That's getbezel.com. But I use and recommend Bezel because it's the best of both worlds. You can go to the site and browse a marketplace of luxury watches, over 16,000 of them, by the way, which is a lot. And I know that Bezel is going to authenticate your purchase. Or you can create an account and get connected with your own private client advisor, called the concierge. Because look, making a watch purchase can be confusing, especially when you don't know all the reference numbers. When was this made? Did they use ceramic then? Is it a triple lop, dingle top? What the heck? I don't even know. But they do at Bezel, and they're here to help. Concierge, baby. Look, if looking for your watch to mark a special occasion, or maybe you're just doing research, right? They even have their own journal where you can learn all the ins and outs about Bezel and the brands and all the stuff that's happening right now. But back to my bids. Yes, Bezel now has auctions, and not just any auctions. They got Rolex, they got Cartier, they got Audemars Piguet, all the big dogs and more. So you can discover, bid, and know the Bezel team has got your back with verified in-house authentication. So visit getbezel.com on your smartphone or computer. Bezel, the trusted marketplace for buying or selling your next luxury watch.
So you make the coat, you go to market. It's what year was this? February 2018, is that what you said?
Yeah, so I'm making the coat. My first sample was February 2017 is when I did the whole New York cycle.
You're John.
Yeah. And then I actually had to end up switching from where I was making that in Cleveland. They closed.
Oh.
So I have to now go find someone else in Cleveland who's willing to sew coats.
Because you're still dead on locked on Cleveland.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. A lot of that too is, I was thinking smaller than I should have, but it meant so much to me. I definitely felt like I was trying to erase what my parents went through and not handling that the most maturely, almost very stubbornly, very short-sighted, but it was just, this is the way I'm doing it. It's all going to be local no matter what. And it was definitely like an attempt to erase what my family went through.
Wow.
And everything they did was local. So it felt like the only way to do that
redemptive
was to stay local, was to actually build something within that community that I existed in.
Yeah.
So I was hell-bent. It would have been much easier to take some word-of-mouth recs here in the city or elsewhere. And I found a husband and wife on East 55th in Belford. And they were willing to take over my production at the time. But the coats, they became a real issue at that time because now it's just completely out of season. But I have 60 of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Disaster of a decision, too.
Well,
Yeah, so I should have produced about 8, and I did 60. I still have 4 in my basement I haven't sold yet at home.
Same for the archive.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, and at this point, I just started building a spring-summer collection. And now we're talking like March 2018 when the coat debacle I can't do it at this point. So from March until August, I built out a spring-summer collection at the time. And then I did a pop-up in Lakewood, Ohio on August 10th, 2018. That was the very first day I launched any of my clothing. And everything at that time was cut and sew in Cleveland. And then we supplemented that with some designs that I made with Golden Bear Sportswear, which is a lot of people private label them across. They're widely used in the industry. But that's who I also used to do some leather goods, some varsity jackets, some lightweight bombers, things like that. Yeah, so it was a spring summer, very first collection, August 2018.
And now what's been happening? Because obviously you've grown in a good way, very small and like incrementally.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like somewhat intentionally, but not entirely intentionally. I grew horizontally before I grew vertically. So I felt like I had this incredible foundation in place. And it wasn't, I just picture it literally like if you go vertically too fast, you just crumble and fall over if you're a building. But if you go horizontally, you have this super strong foundation.
Yeah.
And then you just start building it story by story from there.
Yeah.
And it feels really secure. It feels very intentional. And it feels that I'm not operating at anyone else's pace because it's just me. And at this time, I have no stockist for years, really. So.
And then how are people finding you? Just like social media? Or is this?
I had a studio.
Okay.
I'm still in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a studio and showroom right on the edge of downtown Cleveland and Asia Town.
Yep.
And I'm still there today on East 25th Street.
Yeah. And
so
then
word of mouth, pop-ups.
Yep.
I'm doing, all of the makers shows in Cleveland, taking my booth. Pretty much anytime I had a chance to do a pop-up, I did it. Anytime I had a chance to show in a building with other designers, craft makers, anything, I was there. And I did that cycle for 2 years or so. We had a Cleveland Flea at the time. I did that. And that was honestly probably the hardest stretch of the brand because I was being rejected face to face in real time for my price points in Cleveland.
What were your price points?
I mean, way lower than they are today. But, I did have jackets that were $400-$500 for a top coat or a trench. I had button-up shirts at the time. I were like $150. I wasn't even making money.
And people were like, no.
They would literally just go up and scoff in real time. And I'm just watching it unfold.
Oh, God, that's awkward.
So really, yeah, I was furious half the time. I was just not seeing any light at the end of the tunnel. I was feeling lost.
And they cost this much because
it is not cheap to make things in Cleveland. I think people have this idea that made in Cleveland means that it costs less maybe in New York or something.
Yeah.
Or Italy or anywhere else. It doesn't. I have proof that it does not. It's actually more expensive because there's less makers and less sewers and there's less trade. So when you have a region that only has less than 10 people who are sewing clothes on a factory level, the costs to make things are pretty high. Yeah. And and I say that saying they should have charged me more, knowing that. I mean, knowing what it takes to, maintain a life and a livelihood, they were giving me bargains and it was still expensive relative to other people in the industry. And yeah,
because there are also local people that are making these things
completely
that there's a cost of living attached to each individual who's behind it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't think people truly understand that. People, and I this may sound like a weird take, but like buying made in America is a luxury because of what the capital and human capital it costs to make things here.
Yes.
But people think buying in America is like blue collar, and it really isn't. Because also like it's specifically with clothing. Because that industry is just slowly eroded away.
Yeah.
And it was already a hollow shell in the early aughts.
Yeah.
And now it's even less so. And the only way you can do this, and I say this not to discourage, but I say this so listeners have a better understanding. The only way for someone to do this is to make a product that is competing in the luxury air quote market and also deal with the very challenging supply chain.
Yeah.
Incredibly challenging, quality control that it takes to do this. And maybe, a handful of factories, if that's even an air quote, that can take on these projects. So it's versus like you can start your own clothing brand, make a bunch of stuff from Temu or whatever you want to do. And sure, it's, then you can charge that for it. But I just don't think people really have that full understanding. And I don't know. I mean, it breaks my heart a bit, but I'm very, very psyched that you continue to have this conviction to want to make it here.
Yeah, I still do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've lightened up a little bit on this hell bent that 1,000% of everything I do is Cleveland based. It was very limiting to have that approach.
We need some Dan Gilbert money if you're gonna throw that in there.
Yeah. And I've from day one I've been completely self-funded, so I've never taken a business loan or anything.
Yeah, good for you.
Lots of credit debt that I racked up early on, but
you're figuring it out.
I would rather do that in my own name than go another route.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So things you were saying you're growing horizontally. Where do you think the point was where you started to feel a little bit more confident about what you were doing in terms of like, hey, this this is a thing versus like this is a hobby and I don't know what I'm doing.
September 2020.
Oh shit. Okay.
100%. Yeah.
So we're a couple years down the road here.
Yeah. Fall winter 2020 was when it all came together.
What happened then?
Stop trying to make anything for anyone else other than myself.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. The tones, everything I wanted. It was completely neutral. It was shot in my favorite industrial neighborhood in Cleveland called Goodrich Kirtland. And everything aligned from the backdrop to the clothing, to the models, to the photography, and the presentation of the brand finally all came together. Because those first 2.5 years, in addition to just feeling like shit from taking my clothes to multiple pop-ups, trade shows, which for everyone who's probably done that in the industry is an insane amount of work.
Yeah.
To set up
all
of that, racks of clothes, the transport, the breakdown.
Ugh.
Yeah. And then the emotional aspect of it. And what was happening when I was doing those trade shows and the collections I was presenting, a lot of it was guessing. And a lot of it I knew in real time wasn't what I wanted to make.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what I was doing. Like, that's the reality is,
right.
If you walk into a factory not even knowing what a tech pack is, chances are it's going to take you a few years to really even be able to understand a garment to make it look the way you want it. And
Can you explain what a tech pack is for folks who may not know?
Well, the funny thing is you realize after you're in the industry quite a while, you don't really need them.
Okay.
But at the time I was told I did. But it's essentially, it can look a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's a physical document. Sometimes it's a CAD. Sometimes it's, but a lot of it really is just a digital sketch of the garment. It includes every single detail from the finishings, whether you want something French seam, flat felled. It includes measurements. It includes the fabric. It's really just an initial guide for the factory pattern makers, anyone who's hands-on creating the garment from scratch, especially during the sampling process. They just need that initial guide.
Right.
And it develops over time, and it becomes obviously less necessary once you have a working relationship with a factory. But if you just walk in a door, it's always everything you can supply them so they don't have to guess on their end, because if they guess, that means money.
Yeah.
I felt like not going to school for it. It really was real time school for me to even make clothes for 2, 3, 4 years to get to a point where I felt like I had any clue what I was doing. And I used to just drive myself crazy because I knew what I wanted to make and I couldn't make it. And that was like that gap slowly got more narrow. But in that kind of mid time of trying to figure out garments, to just feel like you have this vision in your head of exactly what the garment should be and you don't have the knowledge or the experience to get it there, it just drove me crazy.
Right.
And so that's when I feel like that all kind of came together in September of 2020. Then we actually started getting press, which at the time, again, felt like life achievement. I had a garment selected as one of GQ's best new items to buy in 2020. And it was my favorite writer, which was Rachel Tashjian. I mean, I love Rachel's work, and the fact that it wasn't just like a toss in GQ and that Rachel selected it.
Yeah.
I felt like I was on top of the world for
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that being the time where I was.
She's at Washington Post now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Still my favorite though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. She's great.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. Absolutely brilliant. And opulent tips, some in her email newsletter and everything that she sent. Yeah. I think she's critically important to the industry. And will always be a huge fan of her. And so she did that. We were in Forbes, like a little silly write up, and we were in Rob Report. And at the time, it's just, I feel like I've blown up at this point. It meant nothing though, in the terms of like sales and scalability, in terms of like immediate sales. In my head, I'm like, oh, I'm a GQ, everything's going to sell out. Not the reality, because no one had access to see my clothes physically at the time. So you're gaining a following, you're gaining attention, which has tremendous value. It's just at the time relatively intangible. And then from there, I get an ask to come participate in Men's Day for New York Fashion Week.
Here we go.
So that's when it's
full circle.
Yeah.
Did you bring the coat?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I didn't.
We've moved on.
We have. Everything looks very different at this point.
Yeah. Okay.
And I say no.
Why?
COVID.
Oh yeah, that was going on, wasn't it?
So I am very bummed because my first New York Fashion Week presentation would have been digital.
Oh, boo.
I wanted to say yes so bad because it was just like, I'm right here. I just got in GQ. Sure there. Said no. And it's just a gut punch because I'm like, they're never going to ask me again.
Oh yeah, no
I'm done.
means
I'm cooked.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. A few months pass, I get called again. They want me to show. They're moving to physical, but I and all guests will have to wear a mask. I say, fuck it. Let's go.
Yeah,
Let's
of
do
course.
it at this point. Because it's also like, I can't host anyone in my showroom during COVID. I've got people literally coming to my house with everything that I sell on a rack or two.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm also not hardly making anything at this point because at this time, my e-com was completely dead. I think I was getting 5 or 6 orders a year online. I mean, we're talking no movement online. So everything I was selling was a showroom appointment in Cleveland. So during this weird part of trying to figure out what the brand looked like during COVID, I was hosting people at my home, which I hated.
Yeah.
For many reasons, but
I get it.
Yeah, it's just weird. It's kind of intrusive in a way.
And, You're like, please don't comment on anything else in my home. This is a work in progress or whatever. Yeah. I get it. Yeah.
It was a spare bedroom too. So I'm like walking people up the stairs.
Sure.
They're just like in the whole house. Yeah. So at this point, I knew something had to change.
Mm-hmm.
And again, luckily I have the full-time corporate job to even sustain creation and making during all of this. If it was just the brand, it would have absolutely closed. There was just no sales coming in whatsoever. I think at one point I went 6 months without a sale.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy to go back and think about now. But that's where I was at.
Sure.
And yeah, so I show New York Fashion Week, September 2021.
Okay.
That's the day. That's the debut. And I only casted my friends from Cleveland.
Okay.
Brought them all here.
Yep.
They brought themselves here. I certainly didn't have the money to pay for 16 people to come model for me. And the collection got really great reviews. And I ended up getting a New York Times feature by Guy Trebay.
Yeah.
And he loved that collection. And thank God he did, because that article then prompts me into getting some e-com.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a chef from the Catskills buy a moss green denim jacket at the time. And I get a request to have Jake Gyllenhaal wear a set from the collection on a talk show interview. And everything feels very surreal at this moment. We got a few other write-ups, and New York Men's Day at the time is being covered fairly decent.
Yeah.
There's pretty much automatic articles you're going to get, whether it was Hypebeast or High Stabadi at the time. We got coverage that way. And then I'm thinking about it. I get asked to come back again in February of 2022 to show another collection. And I have to do this. I can't be a one and done, especially with how much success I had from the first showing. But during this time, because, our manufacturing center is so small in Cleveland, I pretty much have to forego any collections at this time and only focus on sampling for the next New York Fashion Week show.
Right.
So I'm selling nothing.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah. And to get to the 2021 to show those 40 pieces or so, all sampling.
Right.
So I'm not selling anything. I mean, I'm just bleeding money at this point, opening up. Where can I find the best deferred interest credit card? Open 2 of those. I'm just I'm racking up credit card debt like crazy at this point. I was like, I'm not doing this. I will find a way.
Yeah.
So we get to that. Another really successful moment. Random. There was a contest during this one where the Perry Ellis design team would pick someone to be creative director for a season.
Okay.
I win.
Oh, wow.
And it never came to fruition.
No.
I don't know if they had like a creative director overhaul, but I was so excited. I'm just like, this is exactly my wheelhouse, even though it's not, it wasn't that aspirational or inspirational of a brand for me on any level. I felt that it was such a blank slate that I could make it as cool as the people in their market. So I was just very excited to have that opportunity. Never came to fruition.
Really?
Anyways, so at this point, it's like a reevaluation of the brand entirely, because I haven't sold clothes for a long time. E-com is still absolutely dead. But at this time, I'm able to at least get back in the showroom. I'm able to host people. Cleveland people are all excited because
hometown hero.
Well, yeah, I was the first Cleveland designer to ever show at New York Fashion Week.
Didn't know that. Wow. Yeah. There you go.
There's never been a Cleveland brand on the calendar until I did it, which was
Okay.
like, I'm not saying that as a flex, but at the time, I think Cleveland people flocked to that storyline.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm leaning into this
Yeah.
because I need people to come buy my clothes and see them in person. Yeah. And from there, it just evolved. And it was, let me think of this date here. Fast forward, and I end up getting a stockist finally, years later still. And it was June of 2023.
Okay.
I get my first stockist, Canoe Club.
Oh, yeah.
Incredible first stockist.
Yeah. Great.
I mean, usually, I always thought it was going to be somebody in Cleveland or someone local or just a local type of boutique.
Where's my hometown hero love, assholes?
Zero. To this day, zero. Good thing. I'm probably dodging a bullet, but
yeah, that's all right.
it just isn't. It's not
So
for
Canoe
me.
Club knocks on your door.
They do. And it was great. Midwest connection. Timothy and Chase are both Midwest guys.
Yep.
Chase actually went to Kent State. The guy who does my graphic design, Nico, he's best friends with Chase from college. He's in Chase's ear a lot. Like, gotta give this guy a chance.
Yeah.
And they do. And sold through pretty much immediately. I mean, within a month,
Oh, that's great. That's huge.
12 SKUs were gone.
That's
And they put so much effort into it. They did videos.
Yeah.
They had me on their podcast. They really got behind me, and they did. It wasn't just this empty, hey, we'll do this guy a favor. It was like a real belief
right.
in what I was doing.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, Canoe Club first stockist. Now I start to get a little bit of e-com noise. Again, not much, but we're talking maybe from going to 5 to 6 orders a year to maybe 3 or 4 orders a month.
Well, that's significant.
It's great at the time. So people are starting to finally catch wind of the brand. And a guy who bought a shirt at Canoe Club wears it here in New York to Ann Son, which is my stockist here in Manhattan on Sullivan Street. They strike up a conversation with the workers and the owner at Ann Son. I get a DM like the next day.
Pally's cousin. Yeah.
Yeah. Ben. And he reaches out via DM. He's like, I would like to FaceTime, just have a conversation. I was introduced to your work by a customer, looked into it deeper, absolutely love what you're doing. Want to have a conversation, think you'd be a great fit. We have a FaceTime, we hit it off. And they picked me up. They bought ATS, which is available to sell, meaning anything that I have on hand in my showroom or studio or just inventory wise. That's when a store just buys that direct. And so he bought some ATS items. It sells through really quick. Do another ATS. It's selling through. And now that's probably, I would say sales wise, they're my number one stockist at this point. But the word of mouth that has come from me being an Ann Son has completely changed my business model at this point.
So I want to call something out because I think a lot of people are getting taught the opposite of what your experience was to launch a brand. In the sense that if you want to launch a brand, you need to get a Shopify and you need to get an Instagram and you need to get a TikTok and you need to go tell a bunch of stories and you need to make all this content. You need to do all these things. And then people would say like, don't sell to a retail store because they're going to try to take your story and weave it into their own. And you need to own your own story. And you need like, I literally sat through a lecture at a prestigious university where they were telling people more or less like, to kind of, these are young designers, like so young college kids, but like, and they're more or less, the speaker at the time is basically denouncing retail.
Okay.
And it was interesting because I knew
this was recent.
This was,
Okay.
And this person was like, and I knew who this person was and I knew where they came from. And I'm not going to put them on blast, but obviously, but like, I was like, I know where you came from and you're against retail because you got burned by the people you worked with.
Yeah.
But to say, I mean, especially these young, impressionable minds, right? Whatever. And saying that like, you really shouldn't have retail. If you want to own your own brand, you need to do this. You're your own publicist. And it was kind of like this, the whole world is shit. So this is how you need to operate to survive.
Yeah.
And I had to speak next after this. And I was like, well, I was like, somebody sucked all the fun out of the room.
Yeah.
But I was like, to think about that is such a cold and callous way to one, just navigate life, assuming that everyone around you is more or less an enemy. And he did not use that word. Right. To be very clear. But like he spoke about things as if you're not owning your own story, someone else will.
Yeah.
But here we are having this conversation, the year of our Lord 2025, right? And you're like, yes, so much of your success. Now, obviously you are working and doing your thing and trying to make this stuff, but was from third-party retailers who are taking a chance on you, and also, finding you, getting excited, customers who had purchased you who are then going to the retailers. And the word community comes to mind quite a bit. And I think people forget how freaking incredibly important it is to have a community. And the community is what's going to make your brand successful.
Absolutely.
I am not belittling your talent in any way whatsoever, but I think that is so, so important to think about.
Yeah.
Because this other way where Leroy Jenkins is speaking on stage, it's like it's you against the world.
Yeah.
And it's like, what a lonely way to go about life.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happened with these kids. I tried to speak in direct opposition against his thing.
Yeah.
I don't think he was very happy with it. I didn't, but I was just like, there's no way anyone's going to survive if you always assume everyone's against you. Like, it's just awful.
Yeah.
But so you have this thing, it's going quite well, and it's based on all these other retailers, working with you, you're working with them, this whole rising tide lifts all ships thing. So what happens next? Did you pull everything from all your retailers and just own your own story or whatever?
No, I leaned into it.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any right or wrong way to do this. I just think you have to, whether you're going DTC, whether you're open to stockist, whether you want to go almost all wholesale.
Yeah.
I think it really just has to be honest. And I think, there's a lot of bullshit out there, but I think more than ever, the consumer, especially in the market for people who shop at the stores that stock me for the brands that are similar to mine, I feel like it's a pretty intelligent consumer. And I feel like they can absolutely read through bullshit. So I think the fact that my brand is incredibly honest, I think the fact that I'm a kind, humble person goes a long way. Even, I think a lot of people get caught up and they have to prove themselves with avant-garde designs and things. I'm like, hey, if you just treat people with respect, you're reliable.
Yeah.
You're honest.
You ship on time.
Yeah. They want to work with you.
Yeah. Well, who would have thought?
You'll get much further than the talented people who have those blind spots.
Yeah.
So I really think a lot of it's just about being dialed in on a human level. And, if I'm approached by a stockist and it doesn't feel like the right fit, it doesn't feel like an honest fit, I'll say no. So it doesn't have to be this all or nothing approach. I think it's about being intuitive. I think I can sit down today have a conversation with a store owner or buyer. I'll get a pretty good read. You can tell if someone's truly enthusiastic or if they're trying to fill a hole.
Right.
And when I'm met with enthusiasm, when I'm met with people who use words to describe my brand the way I would, you can sit and think it's not like this manipulative thing, but you can absolutely get a great read.
They care. Yeah.
And they didn't just get excited and reach out because they think they can benefit from having you. They reached out because they saw it, they believed in it, they understood it, which is critically important. I would never go into a store where I felt misunderstood.
What do you think?
Because they're telling your story.
Well, exactly. But so what do you think is, if you have to summarize what your story is? Because I'll kind of reflect this to you.
Yeah.
I saw your stuff. It felt I've seen your stuff in person and obviously seen, your stuff online. It feels very of the moment in the sense that it's, the color palette is dead on. It's the clothes seem to build upon clothes that you have already made. In the sense, like, I say this in contrast to some brands where it's like each collection feels wildly different. And the only thing that's in common is the fact that there's the same label on it.
Absolutely.
So it feels like you can kind of get some of your pieces over time.
Yeah.
It fits in with other things you've purchased, which is very smart. And also, it's in a good way, nothing is loud.
No.
So it's, and there's this bit of, I think, quiet luxury is not the term I would ever want to use, but there's something a little bit interesting to it. Your fabrics are really, your clothes are very touchable because you see it and you're like, let me see that closer.
You have to touch the fabrics.
Yeah. So there is that sort of mysteriousness to your brand,
Completely.
but it's also, for me, it feels like I'm not intimidated by it. And I think that's a really tough line to walk because there are brands that you're like, oh, that looks expensive. Oh, okay, they're showing it this way. Like what, or someone says that damnable phrase, like I could never pull this off.
Yeah.
So it's very wearable and, exciting. But like for you, what were, is how much of that stuff is incorrect or correct from my experience of it?
I would say it's pretty spot on.
Yeah.
I think, my design approach is I don't like minimalism.
Okay.
I will say that.
Okay.
I also don't like maximalism. but I think at least maximalism is trying.
Okay, go on.
So I think where I'm always trying to strike is how can I reduce without making it something that looks minimal? And I think it's like everything I do is about the practice of restraint. How can I reduce to this very, very, I guess we'll just say reduced garment? How can I reduce everything that's unnecessary and still make it interesting?
Right. Is there a brand that you're like, yeah, I don't want to be lumped together like this? Or is there a brand that you see yourself, or it doesn't even have to be a brand, but I think like that's something at least I try to or even like a muse or a certain person that you feel like this individual best embodies, this film best embodies what you're after. Films.
All the time. Biggest inspiration.
What films?
I mean, I've been watching, I was a young kid watching Hitchcock and losing my mind. So like, that's where it starts. Okay. I get into college, I'm minoring in film. So I'm taking, now I was already watching foreign films on Turner Classic Movies or whatever the hell I got on cable where I grew up. But that's when it really opened my eyes. I got obsessed with the French New Wave.
Okay.
So that's the next thing. And
so you're getting into Breathless and Godard.
Breathless is the gateway. So that's my gateway drug for the French New Wave for sure. And then I would say from like late teens to mid 20s, I'm obsessed with Godard. I'm watching every film multiple times. Huge design influence, huge, mise en scene and all this stuff that I'm learning these terms. Yeah. And then I get older and then it becomes, I feel like Godard at some point, some of his films start to feel less adult because there's a youthful angst in the political messaging. Yeah. There's plenty of adult Godard content, but I thought as a whole, I got way more into people like Truffaut. Yeah. Varda.
Did you get into Jacques Demy ever? I mean, he's not really new wave, or maybe he is. Like Umbrellas of Cherbourg for me is like some of the coolest looking clothes ever.
Yeah, and I just walked by that mural 2 nights ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. First, I'm losing my mind because that was like, while there's not a lot of color in my collections at this point, I still can be very seduced by when color is used the right way. Yeah. And I don't know that any film uses color more importantly than that film. So, I mean, yeah, for folks, definitely check out Umbrellas of Cherbourg. It's a Jacques Demy film. It's kind of a tragedy, but it is a beautiful film, and the fits are, they're so bang on. Yeah. I mean, my films, The Devil Probably.
The Devil I'm sorry, what is the title? It's called The Devil Probably?
Yeah, The Devil, Probably.
Okay.
I would say over the past year, that's been my most watched.
When did this come out?
I want to say late 70s.
Okay.
It was actually banned by the French government.
Oh boy.
When it released. You had to be over 18 to see it because
it's got the devil in it. Yeah. They cast the devil in the damn movie. Okay.
They thought it was so dark for youthful culture that it would lead to mass youth suicides.
Oh boy. All right. So we got some real dark shit for the inspo here. All right.
But it's actually the colors and the tones. You'll see through lines if you watch that film and be like, okay. You'll see what he's pulling.
So the letterbox Rex are flying here. What else we got?
First Reformed, more recent movie.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, love that. Favorite Godard is 2 or 3 things I know about her.
Oh.
Yeah.
Deep cut.
Yeah. All about consumerism.
Yep.
And different versions of it. One Sings, the Other Doesn't by Agnes Varda.
Not familiar with that one. I know Varda.
Yeah, it's definitely a feminist musical. It's about the women's liberation movement at the time, but I mean, obviously a lot more involved in that, but just absolutely love that film.
Okay.
Cachet by Michael Haneke.
No.
I want to say that's 2005.
Well, all right. I'm going to add that to the list.
He's the same director as The Piano Teacher, Funny Games.
Yeah. Okay.
Him.
Okay.
Yeah. And then Nostalgia by Tarkovsky.
Yep.
Cold War by Polakowski. And then News from Home by Chantal Akerman.
Holy moly.
News from Home is the one over the course of my brand that's absolutely been the most referenced.
So when... because I think there's other people I've had on, they talk about how films inspire collections. So I want to kind of unpack this a tiny bit. I think when people talk about how films inform design, are there certain things that you're like, hey, all the films have this level to it? Or is it basically like you're peeking inside someone's world and that sparks creativity? Versus like, I say this in the sense where one example where a person was like, oh, Cary Grant's coat in Charade.
Yeah.
I want to make that coat. Where you're like, okay, cool.
Yeah. Well, I was actually listening to Nick.
Okay. Yeah.
And it seems like she's looking more at the garments.
Yes. She looks at the garments and then also how they fit in that world that was created.
Completely.
Yeah.
And she's brilliant, by the way. I love everything that she does. I love that brand. I think for me, I'm really just trying to capture the emotion and feeling that is present in those films. I do not look at garments from a film and try to even recreate or rebuild them in any way. I take color palettes from film, but that's not necessarily like wardrobe color palettes. It's just what I see or what become the dominant colors as I'm watching. It leads a lot to the visuals for my brand. I take those incredibly seriously. But I think what you said is exactly right. I'm peeking into someone's world and I'm pulling from it. And it doesn't just translate to clothing design. I think it translates to the idea of world building, which I think, if I was the lecturer at a school, I wouldn't be talking about all the things that can't happen. I'd be really, really stressing the fact that you have to build your own world. And I think that is the thing that separates me from brands in similar positions. I think I really have a world. And it's been built not through products entirely, but I think through my imagery. Right. Through the way my showroom looks, and I've become more and more focused on world building as the brand grows. Now that I feel really confident in, I can walk in any factory and build a garment that I want. Now it's time to really turn the dial up on what the world looks like. So we actually have, I don't even post about this, but we have a retail store inside of my showroom where I sell products that I discover and believe in. So, we sell incense, cologne, coffee, chocolate, olive oil. If I discover it.
A lot of food here.
Yeah, it's random.
Yeah, no, this is great.
If I discover it, I want to share it.
Okay.
So, and I think too.
You don't want to gatekeep it, huh?
Never.
Oh,
no,
nice.
I just sat down with a designer that's technically a competitor and I gave him my whole fabric supplier list.
Why'd you do that?
Because I think that the trade of the fabric production is more important than whether or not I sell clothes.
So are you implying he gave you his or they gave you theirs?
Not really. No.
So what was the trade?
Just I want these families to have business. I work with mostly small family mills.
Yeah.
And
well, that's nice. I mean, I think that it speaks to a certain level of confidence to do that because I think it's fair to say most people would be very...
No one shares.
Yeah.
Other than a few friends.
Yeah. But you don't share to someone who might eat your lunch. But I think you're assuming no one is going to, which is great.
No, because if they discover something I discovered 3 years ago, they got to catch up.
Oh, there it is.
Well, it's not even and it's not an arrogant thing, but the reality is I've been working with these fabrics.
I understand.
It's you might get lucky and you might buy that fabric and it works for a shirt right away, but you got to practice cutting it. You got to sample it. You got to wear test. You got to explain how you're going to care for it.
Sure. Yes.
While they're doing that, I've already developed a relationship with that mill. When they're creating new things, I'm going to get dibs.
Okay.
And there's people ahead of me that get dibs before I do. I mean, it's
So this isn't this ignorance and just like the whole world is shiny, happy people. This is...
Oh, God, no.
Okay.
I'm pretty nihilistic in general, but...
All right. Yeah, that's okay. I'm just trying to connect the dots here because I do think it speaks to a level of confidence to have a bit of transparency amongst potential competitors.
Yeah, I think too, it's going back to what you're talking about with manufacturing trade and how important that is. It's like when we're talking about sustainability, we're always talking about polyester or, composition. I'm like, well, I think the most important part of sustainability is
industry.
Trade.
Oh, trade. Yeah.
Because if people can't sew, if people can't pattern make, if people can't do these things, there is no industry. And it doesn't matter if your clothes have polyester or, synthetics. It just doesn't matter. So I think that is the same way I look at fabric production. If these third, fourth generation mills in Japan and Belgium and Ireland, if they aren't getting business, they also, I can't get the fabrics that I want. They also don't have the flexibility to be creative and try new things if they don't have the funding to do it. So the more I can share my fabric resources and they get more business, the more, sustainable my own brand is from that point.
Very true. I agree.
Yeah, so I walked into this industry, everyone gatekept everything from me.
Assholes.
I mean, it's just, and it's so, I'm like, it doesn't,
that's still the norm for a listener. I mean, you just assume you have to fight your way to learn anything about anyone. Yeah.
It's nuts.
But it's also what's taught. So I don't think, case in point, that exact same thing, when they talked about building relationships and, fabrics and stuff, they talked about the importance of term sheets, which I think is good, but also never share anything with anyone. Don't trust anyone. Yeah. This person saying, and I wouldn't be, I don't want to throw that person under the bus, but I think there was a level of hurt that was coming out through their own testimony of, you know.
Yeah, it was their own experience guiding a universal approach. And
Sure.
Yeah, it's just not the way to do it. Yeah, I mean, those families mean the world to me, though. I mean, the most interesting thing about my garments are the textiles that I select. So if I were to pretend, you know, it almost feels like not sharing that information is doing them an injustice. And these people who have been so supportive of me, who have developed, I wouldn't say necessarily like custom from scratch the way like a Dana Lee Brown is doing, but people have absolutely gone out of their way to play around with ideas.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not going to then shield people from, you know, them getting money, those same people that helped me create what I wanted to create. So I don't really abide by industry standards. I'm kind of you know, I don't see myself as a rebellious person by any means, but I just don't think that that's healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I share with all my interns too. We have an internship program with Kent State, like week 2 or 3 every time. They get every single mill I buy from with a link, with an email of who to contact, with the type of fabrics.
Now that's serious. That's awesome.
Absolutely. They graduate and they can start their own brand. It's up to them.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is really beautiful. I don't think, because I kind of pulled that string a bit as we were talking, but to know that like that it's that level of intensity in the sense that like not only is like, oh, here's the name, go look it up and then have fun trying to Google Translate or whatever, but like here is their contact
directly
is pretty beautiful.
Yeah. And we go through like I have them email mills as part of the internship.
Yeah.
I have them order swatches.
Good.
Have them go figure it out. And if they can't, I'm right there to help. But, you know, give them a little nudge. Hey, go get some denims. Go get some jerseys. Like even like the basic stuff, just go get it.
Yeah.
And then bring it back and show me what you got.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I love fabric. So that's.
Well, I will say on the fabric stuff, because I was just looking at some of your samples here. Like you said, the fabrics are the most interesting thing. I will agree to maybe an extent. I mean, there's a level of silhouette, there's a level of pattern making by you or whoever that is really nice. And I think there's a juxtaposition as to some things. It doesn't look like, hey, this. I remember a friend of mine had a brand, and the stuff he was doing was like, what are the things that would never go together? That's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to embrace it so hard. And it kind of didn't really make sense. And obviously he's not doing that anymore. But like, you know, the club collar on that shirt, or that, I don't know the right term, the like chore coat thing I was just looking at, you know, beautiful. And also cut and in a way that was, I'd say a lot of these things feel very forgiving. And it's not like big fit, but it's like, it's a nice, you know.
Yeah, I've always thought it was critically important to design for all body types. And I don't market that because I think that's
smart and it's a little tacky.
Yeah, I don't ever want to be that guy that's trying to prove I'm for everyone, or you know, you don't really hear from me.
Yeah, with
the brand, you just don't hear from me. I let the clothes speak for themselves. I think when I get questions, is this unisex or is this for women? It's not my decision.
Wow,
I make it.
Is that what you say? You say like, hey, this isn't my decision.
Yeah,
it's
not my control. It's not my real, you know, it's not my job to tell a man or a woman that suit jacket isn't for them. It's not my job to tell someone to wear my skirt. You know, I make these things, and if you like it, it's for you, and I just let it go.
Where did that come from? That feels intentional.
Well, I think honestly, I just hate the word unisex.
Yeah, it's a little.
I think it's just the word itself, the way it sounds. I just don't like that word.
Or gender inclusive.
Genderless, I think that's...
Genderless is, all these things are somewhat, okay. But you're just like, none of this matters. Choose what you like. Enjoy yourself.
Yeah, and I think the reason I think people think they're going to sell clothes if they tell someone it's unisex or genderless. I feel like those almost became like politicized.
They did become politicized.
And then it became politicized in a marketable way, which really grossed me out.
Yes, correct.
And for me, it was just, that's never why I entered clothing. I don't really market anything. I just make, and what comes into people's hands comes into their hands. But, you know, I think this last collection, I only casted women. So I'll do things like that where it's like, is this for women? There's your answer.
I mean, that's interesting because I remember even initially looking at some of your stuff early on, I was like, oh, you know, because you had Jonas and some of the stuff. And then, you know, you had different folks in there. Totally fine. Mm-hmm. You know, looks beautiful. But in my head, just because, you know, I am, and I admit this, I am dumb in the sense that like, I want to view and understand things the way the artist is telling me to understand that. I want to hear their guidance to shape my experience.
Yeah.
Is the best, most succinct way to say it.
Okay.
So for me, I'm looking for that. But to know, I mean, this is like, you're like David Fincher, you know? But like, it's the sense where it's like, well, that's up for you to decide.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I need guidance. And they're like, you don't have it.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that a lot.
But I think that's fine. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And it's, again, horizontal instead of vertical.
Fair.
I could sell a lot more clothes if I, provided guidance. I see
A little more hammer over the head sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I don't really try to prove that how great I think anything is. I think I see a lot of designers and brands are constantly trying to prove that the new thing they did was the best thing they've done.
Yeah.
I'm like, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So I get if I see you releasing something new and every single time you're telling me that's the best thing you've done, I feel lied to.
Ooh.
And then I start to take a step back from your brand.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because I just don't know how anyone puts out the best work every single time.
I think that's also this like layer of, I don't know, capitalism or something that gets,
Oh, completely.
Sort of embodied by what they're doing is like every year is more and better, bigger, better.
Completely.
But it's also kind of a little bit of a holistic way that you view life in the sense that sounds like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, you're just as comfortable with the past as you are with the future.
Yeah, because it informs it. There's a connectivity.
Right.
So you have to embrace both, I think. There's not one without the other.
Yeah.
And if there is, you can really lose sight of who you are, I think.
That's fair.
And I think to my core, the brand is me, which is why I don't really say much. As the designer, the owner of this brand, I really say very little because I see myself in the work. So I feel like the work that I'm sharing is the sharing of me in a way.
That's beautiful.
So I think that it's also like we have brand, I say I have brand pillars, and like we have 3 brand pillars. It's curiosity, intimacy, intelligence. So everything I make, everything I post, photo, video, it has to hit those 3. If it's not striking those 3, I can't. It's scrapped. And when I say
there's
intelligence,
that business school coming out there.
And when I say subconsciously, I guess that is.
It's great.
Yeah.
It helps define. That's okay.
Because you have to have barriers. You have to have your own restraints, because if you're creative, you can go off the tracks really easily. And I do want to say, like, when I say intelligence, I don't mean it in a pretentious sense. I think my version of intelligence being the clothing speaks for itself.
Yeah, I didn't interpret it that way.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's easy for that to, oh, he thinks he's so intelligent. I don't. I think I'm always learning and I have a lot to learn, but I do think the clothing looks intelligent and has little hints of intelligence and thought.
It does. I mean, I think your character or the stuff that I see, they're not the leader of a pack in a great way. Like there is a bit of, I don't know, mysteriousness really feels like it to me. Because even then looking at your stuff, like it's something you're like, yeah, oh, cool. Can I see? Like you're the type of brand that's like a zoom in brand.
Yeah.
Where you're just like, that's cool. Let me see what's going. Wait, how is that? Is there a belt on that? Is there but I like that. And I think in a way now we're coming from or currently in an industry that is so much, they're building this world and I can only experience it to know that you're like, hey, this exists and you can, I'm not going to force a narrative on you.
Yeah. Is
really refreshing.
Yeah. I'm glad that you described it as zoom in brand because I haven't heard that. But if I'm aiming for curiosity,
I just made that up just now, but yeah.
That's one of the 3 brand pillars and someone's zooming in. If I'm thinking about intimacy and someone wants to go inward and be and be closer, that's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And I do work in 3s a lot. So I have like the 3 pillars. And then when you were asking about film and how I translate it, I would say there's 3 senses. So with everything I do from an imagery standpoint, when I do post on Instagram, which isn't that often, I'm trying to hit 3 senses. And it's a sense of space. It's a sense of feeling, and it's a sense of product. And if I can give you product, feeling, and space, I've done my work. And that's, so when you 3 brand pillars, 3 senses, and those are my guides. I don't go outside of those.
That's smart. I mean, I think
sense of space is that's the difficult one.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's open to interpretation, I'm assuming, but yeah.
But that's actually for me, that's building whether it's a showroom studio, whether it's a background of photography, whether it's anything. I think when you can start to place where the clothes belong.
Yeah.
And they exist in spaces that make sense. And that could even be boiled down to 101 to how do you choose a stockist.
Right.
Sense of space. So, and how do I make my sense of space when someone comes to my studio or showroom feel special? What is the scent that they smell? Do they want to leave with that scent? Okay, well, I have the incense that's burning. You can buy it. If you like the candle that's burning, you can buy it. If you like the coffee you tasted, you can buy it. So I think that's where the world building aspect isn't just through imagery. It's also when someone steps into your world, can they leave with a piece of it? So that's that's where I'm just constantly thinking about these things, about how can I build the world and how can I give people bits and pieces of it.
That's awesome. That's great.
Well, that's like the discovery. And that's why I think stockists are critical, because you have to be discovered. And there's something special about going anywhere in person and discovering it for the first time.
Yeah.
And that's for me. Like, I can tell you exactly where I was when I smelled the candle that's in my studio the first time. I was at Dear Friend Books, Tompkins Ave, Bed-Stuy, and they had olive tree candle burning from Flamingo Estate. And I asked what it was.
God damn it, Flamingo Estate.
Their
it's
candles
so
are
good.
Great. It's the best candle.
It really is.
It absolutely is. Yeah. That olive tree, I mean, all of their candles are good, but olive tree is special to me.
Never in a million billion years did I expect to spend over $100 for the scent of a goddamn tomato.
But yeah, I mean, I can tell you exactly where I was with anything in my studio.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this was amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. Before we wrap, is there anything you want to add or mention that I did not bring up or discuss?
Well, I do think, I think when you were asking about are there any brands to be compared to, I think because of textiles that I'm constantly compared to like a very short list of designers, and it starts to feel really limiting. I don't think any creator wants to be told that they remind someone of another person who's doing what they do.
I mean, if you admire it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, there's times where people have said, oh, I like, this reminded me of this. I'm like, oh, that's cool because I have a high association with that.
Yeah. Well, I am regularly being compared to Evan Kenori.
That's just because you guys are Americans. God.
But every time, that's what it is. Oh, this reminds me of Evan, or it reminds me of James Coward. I love these guys. Okay. I just think it's because they see it as a certain niche.
You're white dudes who don't lead with their own personality in a brand.
Yeah.
And Americans.
Yeah. And it's like, it is on one hand incredibly humbling because I admire those brands. I admire those designers. But I think my brand for where I'm at relative to other brands I'm competing with, I think for menswear, I have more of a sensuality.
Okay.
I really think there's through lines of like sensual nature that doesn't necessarily exist in the brands that I'm compared to. And I think that's a really important difference to note. And I think it translates way more to kind of like a romantic aspect with the imagery and the women that wear my clothes and what they look like when they wear my clothes versus what they look like when they wear those other brands.
Now that I wholeheartedly agree with.
I think women look incredible in my clothing.
Yeah. Yes. Agreed.
And I don't know that I can say that for a lot of brands that people put me in the same market as. There's just a difference.
Yeah. I hope you take that as a compliment, because even though that that may sound aggravating, you should take it as like they're viewing you at a standard.
Pretty high level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but
I think the other thing, can I just shout out some people who've been I would love to give some other people some love.
Absolutely.
I just want to say that we talked about Anson and the owner, Ben Strykoff. He's the one who organized the Maison Liaison, the showroom. I just showed in Paris for the very first time ever for Market. So I think you will see, if everything goes as planned, more and more stockists coming after that, because I've never taken a thing to market. I've never reached out to a store asking to be stocked. They've always come to me or discovered me. So this is almost a 180 from that business model.
Awesome.
But Ben, I would say maybe even more than myself over the past 13 months has been the most responsible for my success. And
That's great.
He's a good dude.
Yeah.
Like genuinely.
Very good guy. Great eye.
To the core, though.
Great merchant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when no one's looking, he's even better.
That's awesome.
And I love the shop. So anyone, if you're listening, and Son on Sullivan Street. But I think it's just important when you come across people like that in the industry who he puts everyone above himself. He fights harder for others than he fights for himself. And I just know my brand would not be where it's at without him. It would look a lot different today for me as a brand. So I think that's critically important. I also have the brands that were in my showroom, Silphium, Archie, Paratoto, SK Manor Hill, Rice 910.
Mm-hmm.
Out of those, if you like my work and you appreciate what I do, please go look at Silphium and Archie. Brilliant, brilliant designers, brilliant minds, very intelligent clothing.
Where are they based out of?
New York.
New York. Okay.
Yeah. Onea is the designer for Silphium Studio. She has a studio in Brooklyn where she cuts and sews herself, but she also produces in the garment district here. And then Mark Smith Clark is the designer for Archie. And
SK Manor Hill, that's Korean, right?
No. He's New York based too.
Oh, he is?
Yeah, he studied in Florence for a long time. And then his name's Dom. And then he worked under, he was at Engineer Garments after Florence.
Right.
And then he started SK Manor Hill, I want to say in 2016. Rice 910 is Japan, Paratoto is Philadelphia.
Nice.
But we're kind of all in that room of younger independent designers. And we're all there because of Ben. Again, Ben does everything for everybody. And
that's great.
Yeah, he didn't have to do that. He's running a successful shop, and he took a lot of us are in that. We're all stocked at Anson for the most part in different ways. And just another example of him going above and beyond. I can't imagine another story where you have a retailer of independent brands in a boutique willing to then go put themselves in a position to represent those brands during market week and have other stores who are technically their competitors come in and have the opportunity to buy. I think that's a really special type of person to be willing to do that.
Yeah, that's great. That's beautiful, honestly.
Yeah, I just wanted to give him his flowers for that.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again.
This
was a pleasure. Yeah.
And, this is an honor.
Oh, I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
See ya.
Thanks, man.
You've been listening to Blammo. Our show is produced by Blammo Media. We're edited by Amar Lowell, and our theme music, as always, by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. If you like what you heard, you know the drill. Share the pod with a friend. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars or thumbs up on whatever other thing you're listening to us on, whether it's Dingledorp or Bing Bong, whatever it's called. But you can also follow us on Instagram for all the hot content. If you want to talk to us and give us your hot take, we'd love to hear from you. You can send us an email at info@blamopod.com. Last but not least, super ultra important. If I had a air horn, I would press it right now. You got to come and join us over on Patreon, because the fun never stops over there. Look, the live show, the free show, whatever you want to call this, we take breaks here and there, but Patreon, it never stops. And we also got exclusive shows like Dye Workwear, hosted by Derek Guy and Peter Zotolo, and the Triple J Show, hosted by yours truly with John Moy and Gene DeLeon. There's just a ton of stuff over there. So check it out at patreon.com/Blammo. If not, no worries. We got hundreds and hundreds of free episodes in the feed and more to come. So we will see you all soon.